Okay, part 2 of the add-on video comparing the Glock 23 against the USP Compact 40. When I left off in part 1, we were talking about the ergonomics. I mentioned how the slide release from the factory on the USP is actually better than the Glocks. And like I do on all my reviews, you see that I try to be very objective. In other words, I do not favor Glocks or USPs or SIGs. And I don't, just because if I own one of these guns, or heck, even one of these knives, I will not favor that. If I see something better, I will be objective, and if I evaluated it to be better, I'm going to let you know and tell you that. And I don't care if I own it, don't own it, spent money on it, don't care. We're always going to get to the bottom and the truth in these review videos, and that's the whole purpose. If I don't do that, then I really don't serve any purpose online, to be honest with you. So that's what you're going to get from nutnfancy. So it wins with that slide release. The trigger, however, I mentioned it in my previous video, I do not like it. It still flexes, and it's not a huge issue, but it is an issue. Now, one thing I forgot to mention about reliability, and I have to give actually a slight nod to the Glock. And the reason is the magazines are more reliable. You can drop this magazine, at least with a standard floor plate on it, knock them around. Generally, you will not have a problem. That's not to say there hasn't been problems. I haven't seen them, but I have heard about them. The USP, as I previously mentioned in another video, actually does have a floor plate issue with these soft rubber floor plates. If you drop them, the retention button can jostle, dislodging that floor plate and essentially totally jamming that magazine up. So it's not really the guns, it's the magazines and Advantage Glock. The magazines are just more reliable, and that's with a soft rubber plate if dropped on a hard surface of the USP. So slight edge in reliability there. Now back to ergonomics, let's talk about the triggers. This is a striker fired trigger. In other words, it does not have a second strike capability. This is actually an LEM module in this USP Compact, and I actually like it. It's not a bad double action only trigger. It's lightweight, and it does have a second strike capability. Now, some guys will say, I will never carry a gun without a second strike capability. But again, as I said in previous gun review videos, if I fail to fire in any gun, I don't care if it's a Glock or a USP, I'm going to tap, rack, bang, tap, rack the slide, actually tap, rack, ready, and evaluate the target again, and then I'm ready. I'm not going to waste time trying to pull the trigger, generally speaking. So for me and the way I train and I have accustomed myself, it's not a huge disadvantage having a striker fired gun. And what do I mean by striker fired? In other words, if I rack the slide and I pull the trigger and the round does not go off, let's say it's a bad primer, I cannot just pull the trigger again. I actually have to jack the slide to cock it again, and then I can fire again. That's a striker fired versus a double action only, which I can fire over and over again. So difference, some would say Advantage Heckler and Koch, H&K, and you know what, I'll just do it a favor and say Advantage H&K with that. How about simplicity? Well, this is hard to evaluate in a way because this is subjective. Some would say that the H&K would have the advantage, but I don't really know what kind of weed those guys are smoking, because I don't see how a gun could be more simpler than a Glock. It has very few parts. I'm not going to take the guns apart because this takes too much time, but if I were to show you, this has more parts to it, especially with the recoil spring. It has like a floating nylon piece there that's supposed to mitigate recoil, and actually I think it does to a degree. The Glock 23 is just darn simple. It's easy to take apart, easier actually than the USP in my opinion. But both are fairly simple, but in terms of the number of parts, the simplicity of maintenance, I'm going to give the advantage to Glock. Now, another thing I didn't talk about is the sight radius. If we look at both guns, the Glock 23 on the left, H&K USP Compact on the right, the Glock has actually a marked advantage in sight radius. And what do I mean by that? In other words, a longer sight radius, i.e. the sighting plane is longer, makes it easier to engage targets. So these are both compact pistols, but Glock has an advantage in sight radius. And also, notice how they mounted their sights. It's a little bit further back on the slide. And while we're at it, let's look at the width. H&K says their guns are only 1.14 inches wide. Glock says theirs are 1.18 inches wide. But in actuality, when I compare these side to side, Glock wins. This is a chunkier gun. If you look at the milling on the slide, you see these relief ridges here on the, and granted it's tapered and such. A lot of people say I like the tapering of the H&K better than the Glock. Glock is blocky. And this is an older Glock 23 with the non-accessory rails, and it's not beveled like the newer models are. But still, the point remains. This is a thicker portion. Not to mention that ergonomic, however very large, slide release lever right there. That sticks out a lot. And Glock obviously didn't want to do that. They go with a very low profile lever that sits very close to the body. By the way, the one, and I'm going to do a separate video of common sense or reasonable Glock modifications, but you'll see the Glock, the extended Glock lever is very low profile as well. So in terms of thickness, I think the Glock wins. And I'm sitting here holding both of them and have been for hours, looking and studying at both of them. And I have shot them both in real life a lot. So advantage Glock with that. So we were left off at simplicity. Glock has the advantage there. Now how about accessories? Accessories, I think I covered that in the previous video on the USP Compact. Glock wins. If you're talking triggers, magazine releases, extended slide releases, maybe not sights. There's probably a lot of sights for the USP out there. How about accessory rails? That's a huge thing. Now granted, this is an older Glock 23. It does not have the accessory rail, but all newer ones do, and they also have that beveling on the slide. So I will say advantage to Glock in the accessories department. How about price, going down the list? Well, advantage Glock. Again, less expensive, more expensive. A lot more, well, not a lot, but somewhat more expensive. And again, I'm not going to give prices anymore in my videos, because then some guy will post, well dude, I got mine for $20 less. Please, let's not waste our time. There's all kinds of different prices out there. Just suffice it to say, less expensive, more expensive. Track record. Well, I'm going to give both of these, I'm going to give kind of a benefit of the doubt to the H&K and say that it is on par with the Glock. That is saying a lot, because here we have a design, the Glock, granted it was a Glock 17, but we had Chuck Taylor pump over 100,000 rounds through the design. It was still shooting 3 inches at 25 yards. Amazingly reliable. It's been proven year after year with all kinds of police departments, local, federal, military units. Is there a gun design other than perhaps a 1911 that has more experience in the law enforcement community than a Glock? I don't know. There probably is. SIG certainly does. But the H&K is coming along. I mean, it is adopted by many federal agencies. There's several local PDs around the country, and I don't know about Europe. There's probably some in Europe that use it too, and it has an outstanding track record from what I know about it. There are a few quirks about it, like the magazine issue I told, trigger issue, and again, back to the ergonomics, and I forgot to mention this again, that freaking magazine release the H&K uses, which I just do not like. So track record, I'm just going to say they're equal, because even though USP has not been quite as proven in the Glock, as a Glock in my opinion. And just a note on that magazine release, some proponents of the USP design say, dude, I love that because I'm able to shoot without shifting my grip. Well, I'm not sure how those individuals shoot, but when I shoot the H&K, bam, 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 slide locks back, I got to drop a magazine. How do you actuate that with not shifting your grip? I guess you could kind of go down like that. Now, while I'm doing this tabletop review, you can see that it works. But let me tell you something. Under stress and under time, which I've shot this gun a lot doing, it don't work like that. Either I'm pushing right here, or I'm just not getting it. I don't know why. So I have to resort, actually I find that using my index finger on this side, and this is just me and my experience, that's what works better. Versus the Glock 23, bam, 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 slide locks. I just push, extend my thumb a little bit, bam, it's there. And guess what? It's like every other pistol I fire, so it's very standard. Running out of time, let's review real quick. Overall, I'm going to say the Glock 23 wins. It's a lighter weight, it has greater firepower and more options for firepower, equally reliable, accurate, slightly better ergonomics due to the mag release, lots more accessories for a cheaper price. I prefer the 23. That's the issue. Bye.